Welcome to Green Addicts Live, y'all, where we talk about becoming more efficient in life, leadership, and in the efficiency of your home. I'm your host today, co-owner of Green Addicts, Russ Lewis, and I've got my sweet wifey here with me, Cindy Lewis. Say hello.
Hi.
Y'all, we're here to talk about a different angle of order and efficiency today. So it's, there's lots of ways that efficiency or even order can be defined. And so that's kind of what we're wanting to do today is bring our perspective in, kind of how it looks at home. But before we get into that, I wanted Cindy just, tell us a little bit about your history, kind of where you're born, all that stuff, where you grew up.
Okay, so I was born in Miami, Florida, but we moved just when I was a few months old to Houston. And I lived there until I was about 13, and we moved to Maryland. And I lived there until I was an adult. So I feel like the Northeast is really my formative years. Mm-hmm. That's more has created maybe my perspective and who I am in life.
Yeah.
So I moved down here in 2004, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been here ever since.
Yeah. So when you moved down here, was there any motivation? Were you thinking, oh gosh, I just really need to get to Texas for any particular reason?
Okay, so I did know you when I moved here.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
You weren't the reason that I moved here.
Well, so the way we met, I was working at a ministry, and I was in the warehouse area there, just doing, all kinds of things, boxes, whatever, warehouse stuff. And we had a day where we could go and play outside volleyball after, which is kind of like, I don't know, just a thank you kind of afternoon. So I walk outside, and she had been on property, just coming to check out, the place. And I walk out the doors, and I see this, the benches, the bleachers over there, and she was facing away from me. All I saw was big curly hair, gently blowing in the breeze. And I thought, I think I need to go meet this girl. And so that's how I met you. But I don't know. I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you, but what were your thoughts when I came over and said hello?
I think when I had one of your friends from your office or your building.
Yeah, Jerome.
He had wanted me to go on a tour of the ministry. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay. So I went on a tour of the ministry, and I went to every building except for that building. And he was like, well, why didn't you go to that building? And I was like, well, I didn't have time. And, I was thinking, well, I don't really care about touring a warehouse. Uh-huh. So he was like, every day kept asking me, well, are you going to come on a tour of the warehouse? So finally I was just like, okay, I'll come on a tour of the warehouse.
Because it's just so glamorous, right?
So I came, and then I was leaving, and the girl said, hey, we're getting ready to play volleyball. And she's like, our boss never does this, but he said you're welcome to come and play. And I was thinking, I hate volleyball, but I'll come and watch. Because I was in town, totally took a trip by myself, and I was like, well, I just have a little bit of time before this next service, so I'll just hang out. Uh-huh. And so I thought you were cute.
Yes, you did.
But, but I found it more interesting to talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
Because for me, it was like I like, nice looking. I wanted a nice looking man, but I wanted somebody who was interesting also. And so then once I talked to you, and I found you very interesting, and then we had things in common. We knew mutual people from when I had gone to school. Mm-hmm. And so that was what intrigued me much more.
I lured you in with my deep intellect.
Yes, you did.
That's what it was. So, so I wanted to kind of, bring you on today because I wanted to get your perspective, because honestly, we're not your norm couple at all. I think, you can look at the different areas of our life, and I feel like we're very different. Obviously, okay, humans, one person to the next is very different. And I'm sure probably a lot of people feel that way too, but I feel like we're very just different kind of folks, the things we're interested in, the things we do, it's not your average kind of thing. So I wanted to get your perspective on like order slash efficiency, things that we do. So I would say, sometimes efficiency is viewed as what is the quickest way to get results. And so, I mean, what would you have to say to that?
So when I first heard that you said I would be on the show, I was not happy because I was thinking, what in the world? Like, I'm not the most efficient person. If you were to look at the way that we do our life, it's probably not the most efficient way that most people would think.
For efficiency, like in the truest
Like,
definition.
right.
Yeah.
Like, this is the quickest, least waste of resources and time and energy
Right.
to get to point A to point B. That's not really who I am or really our home life. So then I had to kind of like take a step back and think about the ways that we do things, which pretty much in everything that we do is we look at our end result. What do we want? What do we want the end to look like? And then we go from there. Sometimes, especially with parenting and raising kids, it's seemingly very inefficient because here we are saying the same thing over and over and over again.
Repetition.
Doing the same mundane tasks every day, pouring all of our time and our energy into these little people. And it seems completely ineffective, inefficient from day to day.
Yeah.
But that's what they need. They need the slow, the calm, the consistently pouring out and pouring into them, because that's what anchors them in life.
Yeah.
To be able to grow into independent, secure, confident people. And so our end result is to have this wide open, this spacious place in the end with our adult children where they're wonderful members of society who love the Lord, who are giving, but also who we continue to have abundant relationships with. And so our day-to-day is pouring into our children, even in the little things where it's, I may have a completely filthy kitchen, but they need me to come and spend time with them. Sit on the couch. I mean, I can't tell you how many times our kids will say, can you just come cuddle me?
Especially
Or,
Asher.
can we just read a book?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't always look like the most efficient use of time.
Yeah.
But in the end, that's going to get us our end result that we want, because those are the things that are creating. I was just recently reading something, and it was talking about creating remembrances. So we are creating anchors in our day that they're going to remember back to. And so just like we have things that we remember from our childhood that we have brought into the future. That's what we're creating for our children now, is we're creating remembrances that they're going to take into their future and hopefully and likely pass on to their children. Because these little boys that we have, that's our legacy. That's what we have that's going to go from generation to generation. And so the things that we do in our days that may seem trivial, that may seem mundane, that is the ordinary things that become sacred and things that they carry on and will pass down to their kids and grandkids.
And that comes in line with more of the order aspect, of what you're talking about. It's not necessarily even having like, it's a plan, having a plan, not that you have to stick so tightly to it, 1, 2, 3, 4 down the list, but more that you're looking at the end goal.
Right.
That's it. It's not the quantity, it's the quality.
Right.
Yeah, I do get that. Well, you and I are very different. I mean, like I was saying, we're a different kind of couple, but you and I are very different. So I'll say like for myself, I tend to start projects and not necessarily finish them. I'm not saying that I don't finish stuff, but that is with my personality, that's the challenge. I mean, I'll get more than a dozen projects out there going, lots, and I'll get, all these things going at the same time, and then, feeling a bit overwhelmed. But what's some of the things with your personality? What sets you, what's different from you to me?
So I'm the idealist, the dreamer. I want all of life to look like the magazine, which I think that God probably thought was funny, and that's why he gave me 3 boys. I like to start a task and finish it all the way through, see it all the way through before we do anything else.
For instance, with that thought, like when the house is being cleaned, like I like to keep most everything, like picked up, but your order in the house is one room at a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I go from one room to the next, and I don't leave that room until everything is completely done.
Yeah.
And so one of the things for me in keeping order is if you're going to open the cabinet, it's going to be perfectly in order. If you're going to open the pantry or the closet, everything has its own space. It's going to be perfectly in order. And my thought behind it is if I ever tell my kids, I need you to go get this, they know exactly where it is.
Oh, yeah.
They know exactly where to put it away. You tend to like to, we'll just shove it in the closet and we'll take care of it later. Or maybe a box. So we have boxes everywhere full of like odd and end stuff. And so typically how I deal with that is we have a room and I just shove all of his boxes of stuff into the room.
It's compartmentalizing is what it is.
And
It's dealing with, okay, here's these things and they're going to go in this box because I'm going to deal with all of this at a specific time. Not right now. so I get to that later. So, yeah, it's very different, but what we're doing together, like in this differentiation here, is we're choosing to live simply because, like I say, I got a lot of projects and stuff that started to become overwhelming, and for a time, it was a great source of like extra income. I mean, like when we first kicked Green Addicts off, that first year of business was pretty slow. And so I would get these projects. I would get like a motorcycle that maybe needed a small amount of work, and I'd fix it up and sell it for profit. Or sometimes I'd get something that's already working, just got a really good deal on it and just flip it. And so I created an inventory without really thinking about it. So now I've got this inventory of projects that need to be done. And I'm at the point now where it's stressing me out. I was actually talking to Bradley, my business partner, yesterday about wanting to get this simplification going because that's something you've already had a handle on, the simplification, and that's something that you've been teaching me without even trying to teach it, and so that's where I want to go, and I've already started down that path, a while back, but now it's time to really ramp it up because I see the benefit in that type of efficiency, in having less things around that just clutter my brain, because that's what typically happens. There's just too much going on, and having that simple mindset in that, I think that just makes it a whole lot easier. So, I mean, what's like as far as that simplification for you, what does that look like on a daily basis?
So, I think that the way we kind of got into the doing things more simply was before we had kids, it was fairly easy. I mean, we both had full-time jobs. I had a job where I would work a small shift on the weekend, so I would have a day off during the week, and I could maintain our home and keep it in order fairly easy. Everything had a place. All I had to go in and was detail clean the rooms, and it stayed that way, all week long until I cleaned it the next time. And then we had a baby, and I still worked. I worked 20 hours a week, but I worked the early morning shift, so I would go in at 4. I would get up at 4 and be at work at 4:30. But what we didn't realize was when you have a baby, things change.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to think where it's like, well, we're just going to fit him into, our lifestyle. We're going to make him what we want what we want them to be. But babies are people, and they have likes and dislikes, and they get sick, or they aren't tired when they should be tired. And so we ran into, issues really early on, digestive issues for him that took us a while to figure out. And so we had a baby that would cry and cry and cry and cry and cry. And one of the big things was that...
that was our first one, too.
Yes, this was our first baby.
Zion.
So one of the big things was that this was 8 years ago. You didn't really hear a lot about like tongue ties and lip ties, but that affects the way that they eat.
Yeah.
And so I would nurse him, and he would just want to nurse all the time. And so I said to my midwife, he wants to nurse all the time. Like, what do I do about this? And she's like, well, he just must be hungry, so just keep nursing him.
Yeah.
And so I was like literally sitting, like nursing all day, just sitting on the couch.
I remember it was 3.5 months of every 45 minutes he was waking you up.
He was waking up by the
'Cause
time
he
he
was
was by the time he was 3 months old. He was waking up every 45 minutes to eat, and I just thought, well, I guess he's just hungry, so I'm just going to keep doing this. Until I got a phone call, and she said, I think that I figured out, what it could be. And so I took him in, and that was it. And so we got that fixed, but it had created such terrible habits that he was used to eating that in those increments. And so I got to the point where it was like I couldn't keep up the picture perfect house. I couldn't keep up all of these systems that we had created before having a baby, because now I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work, but having 3 or 4 hours of sleep interrupted every 45 minutes.
It was time for a new system.
And so it was back to the drawing board with how am I going to be a mom? How am I going to be a wife? How am I going to work? And also keep a home. And so we also didn't realize that, and we didn't find out till he was 4, that he had sensory processing disorder, which lots of people don't know what that is, but it can play out. Children that are on the spectrum of ADD, ADHD, autism, a lot of them deal with sensory issues. And so it can play out and look like other things. So all we knew was there's something wrong with this child. We don't know what to do with them. When we found out what it was like kind of like the answer to like, oh, this totally makes sense. This makes sense to why he's like having meltdowns in the middle of the grocery store, why he needs to be wrapped so tightly when he sleeps.
Yeah.
And so he would be swaddled, but it had to be so tight because he needed to feel that pressure.
Yeah.
And so ultimately sensory processing is that they don't process the neurologically process the touch, the senses, the way that a normal person was. And since he was sensory seeking, he needed those touches and those signals much more than the normal person would.
Much more deep. He would feel more deeply.
Yes, he needed to feel it a lot harder.
Yeah.
And so, it sent me out on a search of what do I need to do to find simplicity in life. My life is crazy. This house is crazy. My child is crazy. I need to find some.
It was a trying time.
Some answers here.
Yeah.
And I just began to find out about overstimulation. I began to find out about simplifying things, about living more naturally. And so typically the holidays would come and our house would look like Hobby Lobby had just thrown up all over the place. And so I just went through and I got rid of just about everything. I cleared off the table spaces. And so our home was just much calmer, much more peaceful. I went through all of his toys, anything that had noise, that had batteries, that had lights. We got rid of all of that kind of stuff.
I remember that, thank God.
We got rid of screen time. No more screen time for our kids.
Yeah.
And it was amazing the difference that we saw in just simplifying our life with those little things. The difference that we saw in attitude, the difference that we saw in time.
Huge.
The creativity that came out of them because we stopped buying, we only bought open-ended toys, which allowed creativity and allowed them to decide how they were going to build and how they were going to play with it instead of a toy that had one function and the person that created the toy told you how to play with it or what it was for.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the foundation or the basis of us stepping into a life of simplicity.
Well, and I want to touch on the part where you're talking about the screen time, because that's something that, I mean, so many parents just want to give the tablet or whatever to the kid. And sometimes, quite honestly, there are some times where it's like, okay, here, play a game. It's rare. It
Yeah.
really is rare for us. It's, when you're getting to, there's no other options, but when we made that choice to go down that road of much less screen time, and I say screen time, whether it's a phone, tablet, TV, whatever, we saw a major difference in not just Zion's like attitude. I mean, it was night and day different, and there was no question. It was like, oh, well, this is better. Now I can't say it's that way for every kid out there.
Yeah.
But I can say that in our case, it made a huge
Yeah.
difference.
Well, and we could even tell with certain shows. So some shows, the graphics in some of the shows stimulated the brain stimulation that that happened, caused him to become overstimulated. So
Really
I even
fast,
had
flashy stuff.
I even had to cut out certain shows, and so certain shows, for instance, Little Bear, Daniel Tiger, a lot of the shows that most kids would think, oh, these are boring, these are baby, are really much more conducive for our children and teaching character lessons and not overstimulating their senses.
Yeah.
And so if I ever were to say, like, if I were to ever give them the phone and say, okay, you can watch this because I need them to be quiet, it's typically, we deleted any games or anything. The issue was for us in the beginning was that I had thought, because I had known other people, the examples of mothers that I saw around was more is more.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
if you have one toy, well, then 3 toys, then that's better.
Yeah.
If they can play this game and it teaches them all these things, then what about this game and this game and this game? And so we had gotten into that realm of having all of this stuff, having all of these sensory overloads. And so we just kind of had to do a detox of all of it. And so now if I say, okay, you can watch this show, it's like a treat for them.
Oh, they love it.
And we'll go, like if we go to the chiropractor or we go someplace and they have a show, and the people don't totally understand, like, why are my kids like, can we watch a show? Can we watch a show? And I'm like, it's because we don't allow that. It's like not a free-for-all at home. It's a special occasion.
But what it did, like you said already, it pointed them in a direction of creativity.
Yes.
These kids love to go outside and play and create. And I mean, the things that Zion creates, he'll sit down and, I mean, he'll spend a couple of hours, making what was the nature journal, or whatever. I mean, stuff that a lot of kids don't do,
Yeah.
At least I haven't seen, and it's cool because it's like taking that direction kind of forced them to think differently.
Yes.
And it's made a huge difference. Yeah.
And it helps equip them. Like, at first, Zion didn't totally understand because he was like, well, these kids get to do this and they get to play games. And then we began to be around kids, and this isn't normal people that were always around, but he was like, well, we went over their house and they didn't even like acknowledge that we were there because they were just looking at their phone. Or we were sitting down at the table at the restaurant and they didn't even talk to us. Or they didn't even want to play. They just wanted to stare at their phone and play the game. And so when he began to see that, he was like, that's just kind of boring. Then he began to realize like the seeds that we were planting. And so when we sit down to eat, or we're in the car, or we're in the grocery store, we're not hiding behind the screen. We're not dulling our senses. We are looking at each other. There's eye contact. We're teaching conversation skills.
Yeah.
We're teaching communication. And so when they're around other people, they are able to communicate with people no matter how old they are, whether it's an adult, whether it's their grandparents, whether it's friends, or littler kids, they're able to be well versed and have understanding of communication and communication skills, social skills. And so once he realized that, he began to understand the what we were doing when we were setting things up. And I look at those also as everything that we do. These are anchors in our days, in our weeks, in our lives that are going to carry our children on, and they're teaching our children how to be responsible, kind human beings.
Yeah. I think one point that I did want to make was that the simple doesn't always mean easy or convenient.
Right.
It's not necessarily the most efficient way, and I say efficient meaning, like when we're making homes energy efficient, less energy, more productivity. Sometimes it's a different face on that efficiency because it's not about that immediate result. It's the long term.
Yes.
So it's an investment.
So I look at it like we're putting a lot of work in the beginning. We're putting a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of repeating ourselves, by the end of the day, I am completely spent. A lot of time and energy into building these little human beings and teaching them and training them and showing them the way to go, giving them remembrances of the things that they're going to remember to take on. But in the end, it's a lot of work up front. But in the end, you're going to see the efficiency play out because as adults, they're going to be secure, happy, confident, independent adults.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that I feel like we see now with kids is they're pushed really early on, and so you see as they grow older, they may be independent, but they're very insecure and they're not confident. And so it creates problems. It creates insecurity problems. It creates them looking into other things to find who they are. And so when we put the work in the beginning, we're giving our children time and space to discover who they are. And so as they become adults, they become efficient adults earlier on and able to become people in society that can make changes and do what they're called to do rather than become adults who are still searching for who they are.
Yeah. So along with that, like you're homeschooling our boys. And so tell me a little bit about what order looks like on from that, like a daily routine or you can expound on what order looks like for our boys for homeschooling.
So we took the simplicity into our homeschooling. One of the things that I did was research education philosophies. And so I found the philosophy that I felt fit our home and our family. And one of the things that was important for me was that our children be well-versed, cultured, and innovative thinkers. Instead of just me, telling them, this is what you need to know, this is how you need to think, this is how you work out all of these problems, to get the right answer.
Yeah.
So I found the philosophy that we follow, and we just carried simplicity into that, and so we don't use a whole lot of manipulatives and all of these extra gadgets and stuff like that. We do, if we're doing math, we'll use manipulatives that we have around the house, or the few things that we do use, like we do art study, we do artist study, and so we have artist prints that we'll get, and so they get to study those. And so the things that we do use are beautiful pieces of art or music or even books. It's literature books that they can carry on, that are interesting to kids and that are interesting to adults. And so it's just keeping the things simple that is going to speak to multiple ages, multiple grades. And I'll tell you that it's not easy homeschooling with toddlers.
Really?
And so technically, even with all of the the subjects that we do, it should take about 2.5 hours to do our school day.
One day, yeah.
Which is amazing considering if I were to send him to school, he'd probably be gone 7 to 8 hours. And so for 2.5 hours, we do our lessons, and then he has the rest of the day to be creative and spend his time exploring and doing the things that that develop his interests, that develop his thinking and who he is. Like, he loves to draw. He loves to, right now he's into doing comics or building Legos. And that's all creating different aspects of who he is in creativity,
Do you
innovative
have-
thinking.
Do you have the pictures of those of the boys that you could pull up there, Ziggy?
I think he put the scientist one.
Oh, did he already? Okay, I wasn't looking at that screen.
They love to dress up, to play different parts. So if we're reading different stories, the next thing we know, they're going to come down dressed up as those characters.
It's true.
And so one of the things also in our schooling that we're big on is literature, is reading.
Yep, there they are. They got their
And-
little science area.
And so teaching them to be, I recently read something and it was talking about how children, the best way to teach children morals and character lessons is through literature and through reading, rather than us saying, well, this is who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to act.
Yeah.
And so we surround them with stories about people of character from history, or even, superheroes.
Yeah.
Or things like that. It's teaching them to fight for justice and stand up for what's right. And so building those character lessons in them through literature. And we just recently went on a trip. We drove to Virginia.
Oh, yes.
And
Beautiful area.
we did not take any screens for them. Instead, I bought them these Discmans and bought them CDs that were stories on CDs. And they're short little stories that just talk about different people from history. We were going to go to Monticello, so I got them. One was a story about Thomas Jefferson, and it's just lots of different stories and different people. Some of it could be, I think some of them are Bible stories, some of them were just different people in history. And they spent hours just listening to those. That was the easiest car ride, the longest car ride that we've
Oh.
ever taken, and the easiest
And the
car ride
easiest,
that
yep.
we've ever taken. And we didn't have to quiet them or try to shut them up or dull their senses with, like putting them in front of a screen. They were learning in the process.
Yeah.
And so something else that we do is a lot of nature stuff. We do a lot of nature study, going hiking, playing in the creek or in the lakes. Now, I would not necessarily do this on my own, so we have a homeschool group that we're a part of, and we go and do that.
Wild and free.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a group. And so then as a family, when we travel, we'll add that into our travels.
Yeah.
And but the things that that the kids learn, and even just pointing out and teaching them to be noticers of life. And so when we're walking, we point out the ladybugs or the colored leaves or the butterfly or whatever it is, the sound of the birds, the sound of the waterfalls, all of the different sounds and senses that we experience in nature or in life. And it helps them become noticers in life. And not just with things, but with people too.
Yeah. It's a whole different perspective, like we already said, to have an efficiency in our home and an order in our home. It's a slow down perspective. Literally, when I go into a house and I'm looking to see, what are the solutions that this person's need, I'm asking lots of questions. I'm finding out what areas in the home are hot. Where do you feel a breeze? I mean, we're gonna use the test equipment anyways, and we're gonna be looking for all that stuff. But I like to kind of already point in the right direction. But I take the time to ask questions, to go up in the attic, to look around, not just go out to try and sell this quick product. I want to really be thorough. And in a sense, that's what you're doing on a much longer term scale here with the kids. It's not about just getting that quick, what do we need?
Yeah.
It's let's take the time and let's make sure that the quality that's going in here is the highest, the
Yes.
best.
And we create order in the home because that gives us space and time to do the important things, which is pouring into our children. And so the order that's in the cabinets or in the closets, that's all nice. And I believe helps in the, outer order, creates inner calm. I totally believe that. But the purpose behind that is to free us up to give us time for the more important things in life.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a manager of things. I want to be able to have the time to pour into my kids.
Yeah.
And so that's what I look at as the purpose of having an efficient system in our home, or just with our things, of freeing us up, of living simply. That's the purpose behind all of that.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that we do aren't necessarily always going to seem like the easier way. Living simply isn't always easier or the fastest way to do things. But it's intentional. And so the things that we do, we slow things down so that we can be in the moment. To live intentionally, even in the simple, mundane things. For instance, one of my favorite chores is hanging laundry.
Oh yeah.
And so in the beginning, it was my time to get away and think. I need to think. Like I need to process things. What's going on? Why are my kids acting like this today?
Yeah.
Did they eat too much? Did they watch something that triggered it? I need to process all of these things. So in the beginning, I would sneak out there and hang my laundry, and that was my kind of refresher time. Take a deep breath, think about what's going on in our day, where we're headed, and now it's it's a moment in our day. The kids may be running around playing, and I go out and I can it slows me down back to where we're at in this moment. If it's in the springtime, it slows me down where I'm I can hear the birds. I can hear my kids playing, and I can hear them laughing and the conversations that they're having. And typically, if I'm inside, I'd just take the clothes and we'd throw them in the dryer and we'd be done.
Yeah.
And I feel like I would miss that whole experience of slowing down in this moment and experiencing this time. Sometimes I'll have Zion come out, and yesterday, he came out and I said, okay, do your recitation. I want you to do your recitations while I hang laundry. And so he recites his poetry or his scriptures, or he does hymn recitations, and then he'll practice his singing. So he'll either, yesterday, he was doing his hymn, singing his hymn, or his voice, his solfa.
Yeah.
His voice lessons. And so I'll have him out there doing those things with me. And those for me are again, remembrances that our children they're anchors in our day that our children can look back at and remember.
Yeah.
There was this study done with kids, and because, a lot of the time in school, we can be all about memorizing the facts, memorizing the periodic table, memorize your multiplication tables. And kids don't care about things that aren't important to them. And so one of the things that they did was they had them memorize these facts, and they sprayed this perfume or this scent. Uh-huh. And when they went while they were memorizing them, when they went to the test, they sprayed the scent while the kids were taking the test. Uh-huh. And because of that that remembrance of that smell, they were able to help. It brought the remembrance of what they were memorizing. Oh. And so it reminds me of the things that we anchor in our days, whether it's recitation or, the stories that we're telling, the life stories that we're telling, the things that when we sit down to breakfast and they ask me to read, their poetry or read them a story, or we're going on our hikes. When we go on our hikes with our homeschool group. And each morning we get up and we pack a lunch and we go on a day trip and we go out in the woods and then we have a picnic. And those are anchors in their day that's going to bring remembrances to them in times in their life that they're going to go back and recall those things. Mm-hmm. But as they're also going to recall the things that they learned in school as we did those things.
Yeah. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I've even heard it spoken about music, along with that. That's why it's so easy to remember the lines in the song, because it's not just the words, it's the music flowing with it. And it makes sense to teach that way to me. But as far as efficiency goes, I mean, it sounds to me like, obviously with what we've talked about, there's more than one way to have order, more than one type of efficiency in a home and with kids and all. And I think that's what I really wanted to bring to the table here was a different perspective, because it really is. It is an efficient lifestyle from a completely different perspective that, because I'm in the middle of it, I get to thoroughly enjoy. And so, I'm just thankful that we got the time to get to come in here and talk together with my sweetie. So guys, as always, thank y'all for tuning in to Green Addicts Live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. You can subscribe to Green Addicts Live everywhere podcasts are available. That's iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We stream live on YouTube, Facebook, and livestream.com, and onairmedia.com, and that's on-airmedia.com. Be sure to visit us at greenaddicts.com for more videos on what we do as a company, or to set up your free home energy audit, because we're all about efficiency here. And as always, y'all, Green Addicts is efficiently energized since 2007. Thank y'all so much. Bye.